Welcome back to the channel Skytech-Lens. Today we're exploring a seismic shift shaking North American trade and the auto industry. For decades, the US and Canada worked in lockstep, their economies and auto sectors deeply intertwined. But now, that partnership is under threat. The US has unleashed record-high tariffs, aiming to protect domestic industries but destabilizing the entire region. Canada isn't just absorbing the blow, it's rewriting the rules, pivoting on debt, trade, and industrial policy. Ottawa's bold moves aren't just defensive. They're a calculated play for continental leadership. The result? The cars we drive, the jobs we hold, and the balance of power in North America are all being rewritten. Let's dive into how this new era is unfolding. The U.S. national debt has soared past $37 trillion, forcing Washington's hand. The response? Unprecedented tariffs on global goods, including those from Canada. Steel, aluminum, and auto parts prices spiked, squeezing automakers and consumers alike. The North American auto supply chain, once seamless, was thrown into chaos, with every border crossing now a costly gamble. Canada didn't back down. Ottawa hit back with targeted tariffs, maximizing political pain in the US while protecting Canadian interests. This wasn't just retaliation, it was a strategic wake-up call, exposing flaws in America's blunt approach. Automakers found themselves trapped, lobbying for relief as costs soared and production slowed. For the first time in decades, the US looked vulnerable, isolated by its own policies, while Canada quietly recalibrated. The shock of tariffs cracked the foundation of North American trade, but for Canada, it was also an opening. Ottawa saw opportunity in crisis, ready to rewrite the rules and put Canadian interests first. The old order was breaking down, and Canada was poised to shape what came next. This was more than a trade dispute, it was a turning point for the continent. The question, who would seize the moment? Canada was ready to answer. Canada's response wasn't just official, it was personal. A grassroots Buy Canadian movement swept the nation, turning everyday purchases into acts of defiance. Local stores highlighted Canadian goods, and boycotts of American brands became common. This wasn't just a hashtag, it was a real economic force. Meanwhile, Ottawa accelerated trade diversification, forging new deals with Europe and Asia. The CPTPP and CETA became vital gateways, giving Canadian goods access to global markets the US had turned its back on. Infrastructure investments and regulatory reforms made it easier for Canadian businesses to innovate and export. The synergy between public sentiment and government action fueled a new sense of economic sovereignty. Canada was no longer just weathering a storm, it was charting a new course. International investors took notice, seeing Canada as a stable, reliable alternative to the US. The influx of foreign capital and strategic investments created a cycle of growth and confidence. Canada's identity shifted, from a branch plant economy to a nation with global ambition. The world saw Canada as a beacon of stability and free trade. The crisis had sparked a transformation, both economic and psychological. Canada was no longer in America's shadow, it was stepping into the spotlight. Nowhere was the upheaval more dramatic than in the auto sector. Tariffs and new USMCA rules of origin forced automakers to rethink every link in their supply chains. The old model, source the cheapest part no matter where, was dead. Reliability and tariff-free access became the new priorities. Canada's stable environment and global trade deals made its suppliers more attractive than ever. US plants began sourcing from Ontario, while Canadian plants doubled down on domestic suppliers. New trade routes emerged, connecting Canada directly to Europe and Asia. The cost of compliance and border friction drove up car prices across the continent. Detroit's Big Three faced a slow-motion crisis, forced to reconfigure decades of investment. Meanwhile, international automakers in Canada like Honda and Toyota gained a competitive edge, exporting tariff-free to Europe. The USMCA, meant to bind North America closer to US interests, was now tilting the advantage northward. Canada's savvy negotiations and stable climate turned the rules to its benefit. The North American auto sector was being fundamentally realigned. The balance of power was shifting. Beneath the tariff battles, energy became Canada's silent trump card. The US still relied heavily on Canadian oil, especially for refineries built for heavy crude. Ottawa recognized this leverage, reinvesting in energy infrastructure and value-added industries. Upgraded refineries and new pipelines allowed Canadian oil to reach global markets, not just the US. This energy renaissance gave Canadian auto parts makers a stable, cost-effective supply of critical materials. Canada and Mexico even explored a continental energy partnership, reducing dependence on US policy swings. The US couldn't risk disrupting Canadian oil flows without hurting its own economy. This quiet dependency gave Canada confidence at the negotiating table. For automakers, Canada's stable energy supply became another reason to invest north of the border. Energy wasn't just a resource, it was a foundation for Canada's new industrial strategy. The flow of oil became a silent arbiter in the trade war. The cumulative effect? North America's economic map was being redrawn. The old US-centric playbook was out. Ottawa and Mexico City were asserting new independence. US protectionism backfired, raising costs and isolating American industry. Canada, meanwhile, was booming, modernizing ports, attracting global investment, and building a two-ocean trade network. US firms began moving operations north, seeking stability and global market access. Canada's economy diversified, exports to Europe and Asia surged, and reliance on the US shrank. The auto sector embodied this shift. Production decisions now weighed rules of origin, energy costs, and global access. Canada emerged as the continent's stable, globally connected manufacturing platform. The US struggled with volatility and internal debate, while Canada signed deals and built infrastructure. Boardrooms worldwide recalibrated. Canada was now a top choice for North American investment. The psychological shift was real. Canada was no longer a junior partner. It had turned crisis into opportunity, rewriting its role on the continent. The new North American playbook was more complex, with Canada holding more high cards than ever. The economic geography of the continent was fundamentally changed. Canada had secured a starring role in this new era. So has Canada truly taken the driver's seat in North American autos? The evidence is striking. Canada weathered the storm, diversified, and emerged more confident. Ottawa's strategic response exposed US missteps and built new global alliances. In autos, Canada leveraged USMCA rules, energy stability, and trade deals to attract investment and talent. The US remains a giant, but its dominance is no longer assured. Canada is now a strategic platform, not just a branch plant. Energy leverage gave Ottawa breathing room to execute its plan. The US faces internal division and rising costs, while Canada drives the agenda. Still, the US is a formidable force. Never count Detroit out. The future is an open road, with two rivals vying for control. Canada has seized the initiative, but the contest is far from over. What do you think? Can Canada sustain this lead, or will US pressure force a rollback? Share your thoughts in the comments. The North American economy is shifting, and Canada's bold strategy has changed the game. The old image of a quiet partner is gone. Canada is now a savvy, assertive player. For the US, it's time for reflection and perhaps a course correction. For Canada, the challenge is to keep the momentum and manage its complex relationship with its neighbor. The auto industry's future hangs in the balance shaped by these new dynamics. Where do you see the road ahead leading? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Subscribe the channel for more updates. Thanks.